How you dealing in sleep patterns when you have competition in other countries? Example, Europe and America. This one. Is there any formula you can share best practices?
Yep, I'll have a first go. Australia is a long way away from the rest of the world, so we get pretty good at travelling. Rio for us was the worst possible travel you can do. Going east, 12 hours. 12 time zones. Takes us about 30 hours to get there. So we have spent a bit of time in the travel world. What we do is we get the travel schedule from the team. We will put in their usual wake times and bed times for that specific individual, and then we write a travel plan for when we think they should optimally sleep on the plane when they're travelling, and then we also provide guidelines about when to get light and when to avoid light, knowing that light is the most powerful modulator of our body clock. So it's not always something that is perfectly practically achievable. So we might say, oh, you really need to avoid light in the morning, and you've got rowers and the only time they can be out on the water is in the morning, but you can wear light blocking glasses. In Rio, because of the swim finals being very late, thanks America, thanks John, for US TV. So we, when we travelled with our athletes, we actually kept them on not Rio time. We kept them on a different time schedule. So you'd walk past the athletes in the village and it'd be 1 o'clock in the afternoon and they'd say, morning, like, yeah, because they'd just woken up. So we shifted their schedule by the way they travelled, when they got light, and what time zone we kept them in. So we basically do a combination, and that's based on the time that they're actually competing. But for normal travel, we would just write down we would have a plan for them. We have a spreadsheet where we enter the number and it calculates things for us about when to get light and when to avoid light. We use different glasses in Rio to give light and to block light. So that was probably our most effective way that we thought that we could deal with the travel.
I had a similar difficult task when I was working and living in NZ, because we're further down south than Australia. We're at the bottom of the world, and it was a big journey. But you know, for athletes here in Singapore, we're a little closer to everything. We're kind of in the middle of the world now. So, you know, it might be, you know, for most of our trips, you know, anywhere between 1 hour for Asian Games, 1 hour time difference, takes 1 day to get over, through to 6 or 7 hours if we're heading up to Europe. America and the United States is really niggly for us here. That can be like a 15-hour time difference, so that's quite a nasty one. But it's just about, like Shona said, you know, thinking like, coming back and planning your entry into the country, knowing that it takes 1 day to get over 1 hour time difference, and trying to allow time for that.
Yeah, just extending on some of the stuff that they've already mentioned. So some of my colleagues at NYSI have also used, similar to Shona, light emitting glasses, so using light therapy to actually accelerate that transition from one time zone to another. So we use one called the retimer, for example, so that basically helps expedite that transition, so that, you know, if left to their own devices, it takes a day to overcome one time zone. With the light therapy glasses, you actually are able to actually readjust to that new time zone quicker, and it's quite useful when for us working with youth athletes, because they come from a school environment. So if we give them a, say, a jet lag plan, for example, and they're supposed to execute that plan 3-4 days out of the competition, but they're not able to actually adjust their school schedules, so they're only really able to make those adjustments after they start traveling. So that's where those light therapy glasses actually help quite a fair bit as well.
Yeah, thanks. This is a question on afternoon naps. There are, I think, some sports in Singapore where the coaches insist on having afternoon naps, maybe an hour or two. You know, after they are training in the afternoon, after they had lunch. No, they are forced to go to sleep, actually. Would you recommend that? I mean, does that help?
So we recently just published one on napping, actually. So we actually looked at how naps would actually influence the ability of shooters and sprinters. So what we found was that after a 30-minute nap, it really didn't actually change shooting performance. Sprint performance, ironically, actually worsened after the nap. And so, I mean, taking that finding as it is a bit dangerous, because we were only able to make that outcome measure, that performance measure, about 45 minutes after they woke up. If you look at the cognitive tests and how naps actually improve cognitive performance, there is a temporal pattern in that right after the nap, there is a time where performance decays and then it rebounds. So unfortunately, in our study design, we weren't able to make enough serial measures to see that improvement. So my take is actually, naps, the general literature has shown that it actually improves so many aspects of performance and even health. I think it just needs to be individualized so that the athlete and the coaches know how soon after waking up from the nap does performance actually sort of improve, or at least get them back to that baseline state.
I would just 100% agree. I think naps are fantastic, especially when you're dealing with chronically sleep-deprived individuals. When they're school age, they'll probably be sleeping in school during class. We see that with a lot of our athletes. English or maths is the preferred class to sleep through. However, one thing to say is that we know that napping will negatively influence the nighttime sleep. So you've got to balance those two up. I still think napping overrides the slight negatives that you see in the sleep at night time, because I think you just need to get that quantity in. There's also some really good evidence to show that napping after you've done something where you need to learn helps you reinforce that learning, and obviously can help prepare you for the next task that you've got. So I think it's a great thing to do. We just have to be conscious about how the napping actually occurs.
Yeah, I think in Singapore, for us, it could be the solution when we talk about sleep extension. There's just so much resistance within society to go to bed earlier at night because there's so many other things happening. And there's so much academic pressure, and the kids want to hit the books, and people are out in the hawker centres and socialising with their families and things. So to insert those strategic naps in the day, would be a really good idea here. Although human beings are the most intelligent species on the planet, but also the dumbest. And, we're the only species actually that doesn't sleep, when we are biologically meant to sleep. So go figure that one. But, I've seen swimmers turn up on deck, and they've got 45 minutes. They're there early, 45 minutes to have a lie down and a nap. And, out comes the maths book, and the physics book, and they choose to study rather than get that nap. So it's all very well and good for us to sit here and say, yep, nap. But the reality for the Singaporean athlete is sometimes different. So we need to keep chipping away on that.
Next question: Can you actually make up for the lost sleep during the weekdays on the weekends? Does that really help?
Well, I talked about sleep debt, and for example, I'm probably an 8-hour sleeper. I feel fantastic on 8 hours. The reality is, on my fatigue science, I think on average I get 7.1. So off the bat, I'm about an hour down. Okay, so after Monday through Friday, I'm 5 hours short. So my brain would really love me to dissolve that 5-hour sleep debt on the weekend. I do my best, but now that I'm a little bit older, I find it really hard to actually sleep in when I sort of, the sun comes up and my eyelids come up. But it's an interesting question, because obviously when we sleep in beyond our habitual waking time, we get what's called social jet lag. It's no different to flying from here to Brisbane. Suddenly I've knocked myself out 3 hours and I can feel quite dopey through the day. So it's, it's that cost-benefit seesaw. Do I socially jet lag myself by sleeping in and dissolve my sleep debt, or do I kind of keep walking around with the sleep debt in my brain? And I've talked with a number of people in the sleep field, because I'm still not quite sure what the correct answer is. Most people would lean towards, that I've talked to, would lean towards dissolving that sleep debt and sleeping in a little bit and experiencing a little bit of social jet lag. It's a bigger issue for teenagers, Haresh, isn't it? Because they're already on a delayed sleep phase.
Yeah, so exactly. So for youth, I think the regularity becomes an issue, because if they sleep in, and we've seen this in some data, on Sunday, so they go to bed fairly late on Saturday, and I've had athletes that slept in for 12 hours, so they're waking up close to lunchtime on Sunday. The difficulty then is when they're trying to sleep in Sunday night over to Monday. They go to bed really late, and they start the new week, already sleep deprived, because they have to wake up at 6 in the morning. So that becomes the other consideration as well.
Can one person actually adapt to sleeping late? Like chronically, like that. The military, they are forced to learn how to adapt, to sleep late, to be deprived of sleep. Can an athlete, after many occasions where they have sleep debt, they can be adaptable. Maybe not as good as sleep properly, in a normal, but they adapt. You reckon?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on that. It's a great question, and I think we're learning more and more the answers to that question. But they're now showing that there's a pretty strong genetic component to your body clock. And that can be pretty hard to change. I also think that there's some good evidence now to suggest that when you're chronically sleep deprived, that becomes your new normal, and so your brain thinks that this is the new normal. Your performance still will continue to decline, but your brain is saying, yeah, this is okay. So sometimes when I talk to athletes, I'm like, you actually don't know. They say I'm fine. I'm like, no, you don't know what it's like to sleep good. It's never happened, and you don't know what will happen when you do actually sleep well. So.
And there's owls and larks, isn't there? There's larks that like to go to bed early and get up early, and owls that like to go to bed late and get up late. And it's genetically driven, and there's a real assortment in Singapore. But most people probably get forced into that owl-like behaviour. And some of the work that Haresh showed would suggest, in school children, whilst their chronotype would be very diverse, they're all sort of forced into this owl-type picture, and they're not adapting to it. There's no way they are. They're really suffering for it. So, I don't think so.
Okay. I think that's all the questions we have here. Time's up, really. Thank you again, speakers. Can we give a round of applause to our speakers?